The audience erupted in applause as Meghan Markle stepped onto the stage of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, dressed in a sleek navy suit and radiating calm poise. Colbert rose from his desk, arms wide in welcome, clearly ready for a warm, engaging interview. For a few moments, it seemed like a typical celebrity appearance: light banter, some jokes about royal life, and perhaps a few thoughtful takes on philanthropy. But as Colbert casually referenced the media attention surrounding her and Prince Harry, a subtle shift occurred. Meghan's smile faded slightly. "You mean the obsession," she corrected, her voice steady. Colbert chuckled, trying to diffuse the moment, but Meghan leaned in. "It's not coverage, it's intrusion. There's a difference." The audience, sensing the tone shift, hushed. A line had been drawn, and Meghan wasn't interested in playing along. Colbert, ever the seasoned host, tried to guide the interview back to safer ground, asking about Meghan's latest podcast. "That's not what I'm here to talk about," she said softly. "I came here thinking we'd talk about the media's responsibility, about truth, and how platforms like this contribute to distortion." Her words, clear and direct, carried an unexpected heat. Colbert blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "We're just having fun here," he said, smiling tightly. Meghan responded, "You may be having fun, but when fun comes at someone else's expense, it stops being harmless." There was no yelling, no theatrics, just confrontation wrapped in clarity. The audience tensed. What was supposed to be an easy PR visit had become something much more uncomfortable and much more real. The tension tightened like a cord around the studio. Meghan continued, now calmly pointing out moments from past episodes where she'd been the punchline of jokes, monologues that reduced her to tabloid fodder. Colbert tried to interject, insisting it was never personal, just comedy. "But it becomes personal," she said, "especially when it's repeated, reinforced, and normalized under the guise of entertainment." There was no bitterness in her tone, just measured frustration. It was the kind of challenge late-night hosts rarely face, one that strips away the layer of irony and puts their role under a microscope. The crew backstage exchanged glances. This wasn't how the segment was supposed to go. But Meghan wasn't improvising. She was deliberate, poised, and, most unsettling of all, unshaken by the discomfort she was causing. Colbert attempted to reassert control. "Meghan, I think our viewers tune in for humor, not hard feelings." She looked at him, unblinking. "Then maybe that's part of the problem. People don't want to feel. They want to laugh through the pain, ignore the damage, and call it harmless." The air in the studio thickened. The audience, used to being prompted to laugh or clap, now sat in tense silence. Colbert reached for his mug, sipped, and said, "So you're saying we're part of the damage?" Meghan didn't flinch. "I'm saying you don't get to decide what's harmless when you're not the one being harmed." A few scattered claps broke out. Nervous, unsure. Meghan sat upright, not confrontational, but commanding. She wasn't attacking. She was asserting. And it rattled the illusion of control that late-night shows so carefully construct. Backstage, chaos brewed. Producers debated cutting to commercial. Assistants whispered urgently into headsets. Colbert, sensing the unraveling of the segment, tried one last pivot. "Let's talk about your work in women's empowerment, something we can all celebrate." Meghan raised an eyebrow. "Celebrate or sanitize?" The words hit like a slow-motion punch. "I empower women," she continued, "but only if they're allowed to speak without being reduced to headlines or punchlines afterward." At that moment, the air conditioning hum seemed louder than the audience. Colbert forced a smile. "You've made your point, Meghan." She nodded. "Yes, I have." Then she began to unclip her mic. The audience gasped. Colbert looked stunned. "You're leaving." Meghan rose. "You invited Meghan, the Duchess, but I showed up as Meghan, the woman, and apparently that wasn't what you wanted." Without a glance back, Meghan exited stage left, heels clicking steadily, posture unshaken. The audience was left speechless, as was Colbert. For a moment he just stared at the empty chair. Then, like a reflex, he tried to lighten the mood. "Well, that escalated," he said, half smiling. No one laughed. The cue cards were forgotten. The segment was done, the band didn't play. Producers waved frantically, and the show cut to commercial. But the internet doesn't do commercial breaks. Within minutes, the clip had gone viral. Hashtags like Meghan Speaks and Colbert Confronted trended globally. Twitter flooded with mixed reactions, some praising her courage, others calling her dramatic. But everyone agreed on one thing. It wasn't the interview anyone expected, and Meghan had taken full control of the narrative. The next morning, media outlets exploded. Headlines ranged from Meghan walks off late night to royal showdown on Colbert. Talk shows debated whether she was brave or reckless. Some said she overreacted. Others said she finally said what needed to be said. Public figures began chiming in. Activists stood behind her. Comedians bristled, defending the sanctity of humor. The clip was played on a loop across networks, edited and re-edited, dissected frame by frame. Meghan issued no follow-up statement. She didn't need to. Her message had landed, and the silence that followed it was more powerful than any press. Please. Meanwhile, Colbert faced growing scrutiny, not for what he said, but for what he hadn't. The late-night formula had cracked, and everyone noticed. Inside CBS, conversations were serious. Executives convened to discuss future guest protocols. A leaked memo suggested interviews would be more tightly scripted. Other talk show hosts, seeing the backlash, subtly shifted their tone in following episodes. Jokes about Meghan were replaced by awkward praise. But audiences could feel the shift. Something about the relationship between celebrity, media, and public narrative had changed. And it wasn't just about Meghan. It was about the power of speaking truth in places built on performance. Even those who disagreed with her couldn't deny her conviction. It was a reminder that the people on these couches weren't just brands or headlines. They were human beings with boundaries. And when those boundaries were crossed, even a royal could flip the script. Colbert returned the next night with a noticeably more reflective tone. "Last night's interview didn't go the way I expected," he said. "Sometimes truth comes at you unscripted, and sometimes that's what makes this job important." He stopped short of an apology, but acknowledged the discomfort. The audience clapped, but softly. The show went on, but differently. The laughter was there, but edged with awareness. The guests that week were more carefully handled. No surprise jabs, no risky questions. Meghan's walk-off had left a mark, not just on Colbert's show, but on all of late night. The days of scripted jokes and rehearsed charm were showing cracks. Authenticity, even uncomfortable, had a strange power, and Meghan had wielded it like a scalpel. Months later, the incident remained a reference point. It was studied in media classes, debated on panels, and parodied in sketches. But the original moment, raw, restrained, and resolute, stood alone. Meghan hadn't shouted. She hadn't stormed. She had simply refused to perform. And in doing so, she exposed just how much performance is expected. Her departure wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. A woman stepping off the stage society had built for her, and refusing to shrink to fit it. In an industry where silence is often survival, Meghan had spoken. And though they said she was kicked off, the truth was plain for anyone who watched. Meghan wasn't kicked out. She walked out on her terms and took the spotlight with her.